It may be their lunch spot, or their fishing hole, or their soccer field, or where they visit the King Kamehameha statue. For some, though, the present-day site of Wailoa State Park is Shimmachi, which means New Town in Japanese. A thriving business district of 3 city blocks on the Hilo waterfront, where they lived their fondest childhood memories.
We used to play football, softball, baseball on the streets.
We did get very close with our neighbors. We supported each other, we helped each other in daily living.
And the population was, I'd say, 95% Japanese. Carpenters, stevedores, fishermen.
And also there were many businesses, Coca-Cola, and also the smaller businesses as Gore Brothers, Aikitagawa.
And then all the people would live around, and there would be like a courtyard, and had a community bath and community bathroom.
So you would see the older people walking with underwear, towels.
Yes, yeah.
They bring their own
common,
soap
yeah.
and their own tarai, and
Yeah.
they'd go to the place.
That's why we were just saying this is what we used to call chawang cut. Chawang is a bowl in Japanese, and they used to say that's how they used to cut our hair.
On the morning of April 1st, 1946, a tsunami destroyed downtown Hilo, reducing Shimmachi's 3 solid blocks of small businesses, temples, shrines, and family households to rubble. At least 38 people died that day, among them many children.
And I had a special friend, and her name was Sadako, and I still miss her, but I lost her in the 1946 tidal wave.
Although the tsunami almost destroyed Shimmachi, it was not the only important event to happen in this place where hundreds of lives had been lived for more than 3 decades. Before the wave, the people of Shimmachi worked together as a community to forge their independence from the economic dominance of Hawaii's sugar companies. Together, Shimmachi's closely knit businesses, families, and social organizations pooled their resources and their efforts. Temples, shrines, and other places of worship held them together. They wanted to ensure that the next generations would never know the grueling labor and the world of uncertainties that the first generation overcame in Hawaii. We know the tsunami grabbed a hold of Shimmachi and stole it away. But what did it take? And what, if anything, remains? Most Japanese men were brought to Hawaii as contract laborers for the 5 major sugar companies. The contracts bound workers to the plantation for 3 to 5 years, where they worked long hours under the strict supervision of Caucasian overseers. Workers lived in company housing that was often in disrepair, and the only market available was the company store, where the sugar companies determined what would be on the shelves. The companies would profit from their employees who had nowhere else to shop. Many Japanese plantation workers fought against this system with strikes and other forms of protest. Some workers took a different path. They left the plantation to create businesses of their own, to provide for themselves and their neighbors, and to ultimately build a strong economic foundation for their children. As independent business people, they would not be limited by their national origin, by their working class status, or by racial discrimination. In January 1913, a group of Japanese businessmen formed the Hilo Shimmachi Association. The group organized as a kumiai, an association to assist when there was a death in the family. The kumiai would aid the people of Shimmachi between Pio Pio Street and the Waiakea Bridge. This particular kumiai also became a community of mutually supportive entrepreneurs. One Shinmachi Association member, Kamitaro Fujimoto, came to Hawaii in 1894 at age 16 to work on a plantation. He learned carpentry and built houses for plantation workers. He left the plantation at the turn of the century to strike out on his own as a general contractor, constructing commercial buildings and homes in Hilo's upscale neighborhoods. But even as a successful independent contractor, Fujimoto could not escape the constraints of the sugar companies who controlled the supply chains and processing of lumber. Fujimoto made a bold decision. He became his own supplier, and in doing so, founded what became one of Hawaii's leading businesses.
In 1921, or even a little bit before 21, he and his friends created Hawaii Planing Mill Limited. And this was a company that was designed to supply lumber to the community.
Sumie Tokunaga also forged a path from the plantation to private entrepreneurship in Shimmachi by turning his passion for fishing into another of Hilo's century businesses. He came to Hawaii at age 19 to work on the plantations because, as the story goes, he did not want to be a Shinto priest. At the end of his contract, he left the plantation to work as an accountant in a general store in Shimmachi. He was good at business, but had a passion for fishing. He merged the two in 1920 when he opened his S. Tokunaga store, where customers came from miles away to buy their fishing supplies.
My grandfather's customer base during the earlier times, I heard stories of people driving in from Puna, driving in from Kau'u, even driving in from Hamakua Coast. I guess those was a big treat for families to drive into town after work Fridays or first thing Saturday morning, spend the time in Hilo town, do their grocery shopping, do whatever shopping.
Shimmachi entrepreneurs were good at diversification, meeting the needs and satisfying the tastes of their community. The Ikeda family started a variety of businesses at the turn of the 20th century when Tatsunotsuke Ikeda arrived from Hiroshima.
But he wanted the adventure, so he came over. And so he came over as a laborer, and he was at Kukahaili, but he would not buy anything from the company, the plantation store. He would go fishing. My grandmother would raise vegetables. And somehow he got involved with horse and buggy. I don't know how, and he ran a transportation store.
After successfully starting a transportation business between Hilo and Honoka'a, Ikeda established the first shoyu and miso factories on Hawaii Island. He had a reputation for hard work and for making personal visits to customers in his truck, a rather big deal in early Shimmachi. Tatsunotsuke's son, Shiro Ikeda, moved into noodle manufacturing. This endeavor eventually became Hilo Macaroni Company. The local Japanese press celebrated Shiro as fluent in both English and Japanese and sharp-witted. He was considered a shining example for the second generation. Where his father was known as steady and ambitious, Shiro worked lightning fast to build a $30,000 soda works outfitted with the latest technology. He became known as the man who brought 7-Up to Hilo. Innovation and expansion required capital, and the banking system serve the interest of the sugar planters, not their former laborers who were viewed as competition. Isojiro Kitagawa was one such competitor. He paid his own way from Japan to the cane fields of Hawaii. Before the end of his first day at work, he had enough of plantation life and turned in his cane cutter. He headed to Shimmachi to make his living as a fish peddler.
So that's why, my grandparents were very good, could clean fish faster than you could even imagine.
Though gifted in cleaning and selling fish, the Kitagawa's real talent was in foreseeing customer demand in Shimmachi, starting with the fishermen.
They supplied the bows, they sold gas. As I said, they sold gas for that. They had one-cylinder engines. So they used to going out, put, really old sampans. And the sampans were built like the Japanese sampans.
Selling gasoline for the fishermen's one-lung engine sampans led to selling cars. Kitagawa Motors became one of Shimmachi's most important businesses. Kitagawa was also a partner in Nippon Shoji Kaisha, one of a number of homegrown investment and lending agencies that serve Japanese businessmen. This was needed since the banking establishment almost always refused loans to Japanese customers.
If you didn't have the money to start a business, you'd have to find a way of getting the money to start the business, so they go to their friends and ask them, okay, I got this idea, I'm going to do this business, so I need your help. They got together and decided who had the best idea to do a business, and they all put money in. When I came here, we had stock in Suisan, we had stock in Hilo Rice Mill, we had stock in American Trading, and I didn't realize where all these stocks came from, but they date from the time of my great-grandfather investing in businesses.
Steady hard work, generosity toward neighbors, and a gutsy spirit transformed Shimmachi from a group of new businesses into a new town. In Shimmachi, over 1,000 residents work to create stable, prosperous futures filled with possibilities for the generations to come. The goal was not to be the richest person in Shimmachi, but to contribute to the economic growth of the community as a whole. In just a few short years, Shimmachi's mutual support networks transformed a group of Japanese businesses into a thriving community of shops, temples, and neighbors who were like an extended family.
And the good part about Shimmachi was everybody sort of helped each other out. They really looked after each other. I didn't see too many competitive type of businesses with each other. They all, helped each other whenever they could.
Building and transportation businesses flourished in Shimmachi. Hawaiʻi Planing Mill, known today as HPM, expanded from a small lumber yard to become a major player in the local construction industry. Entrepreneur Gunji Kono brought trucking to Hilo when he founded Hilo Transportation Company, or HITCO for short. Very few people in Shimmachi own cars, but people came from miles away to purchase from Kitagawa. And shops like Quality Auto, Nick's Garage, and Goya Brothers made Shimmachi a destination for parts, service, and repair. Before there was Goya Brothers, there was Aizo Goya's horse and buggy taxi service. Aizo started out as a mule tender for the Puna Sugar Company after immigrating from Okinawa in 1909. He founded his transportation business to support his wife Haruko and their growing family. Haruko came to Hawaii as a picture bride. Aizo closed his taxi service in 1933 to open Goya Brothers gas station and grocery with his sons Ronald and Toshio, known to most as Hick and Square, and Ellen's Liquors with daughter Ellen Hiroko. The family's warm hospitality made customers more like good friends.
My father was more like, well, he was a father to some of the guys, but more like a favorite uncle. He liked to just be one of the guys, always talking stories, going out, going movies with them, and doing things with them.
By the 1930s, no one had to leave Shimmachi to have a dress made, or buy fishing supplies, or have a sign painted. It was the place to go for freshly made bread, sushi, noodles, ice cream, sake, pastries, and fish cake made from the catch of the day. A person could get a haircut, see the pharmacist, hail a taxi, or see the movies at the Royal Theater. Shimmachi had everything. And there were new businesses every year. Raymond Masato Atebara was a family breadwinner at age 16 when his father became very ill. He worked as a butcher, a sampan driver, any job that would support his parents and 5 siblings. To make ends meet during his student days at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, he delivered groceries to Honolulu's luxury hotels. On those runs, Raymond discovered a mainland delicacy, the potato chip. When he returned to Hilo to care for his father, an ad in Popular Mechanics for chip-making equipment caught his eye. In 1936, with little more than sheer determination to work with, Atebara's potato chips opened in its original location on Emma Street. The first months were hard. No one in Shimmachi had heard of potato chips, and Hilo's humidity sometimes made them soggy. With a few adjustments, Atebara's took off. Many years later, when his children asked Raymond why he went into the potato chip business, he said simply, "I like them." Shinmachi was not the fanciest part of town, but its residents were proud of its accomplishments. When President Franklin D. Roosevelt stopped in Hilo during his 1934 tour of the U.S. territories, Shimmachi businesses and the Japanese immigrant newspapers extended aloha and highlighted their economic contributions in the depths of the Great Depression. Kango Kawasaki, president of the Hilo Japanese Association, greeted Roosevelt as the chief executive of the land, creator of the New Deal, and the apostle of new democracy. Although most in Shinmachi admired the New Deal, they stayed focused on the neighbor-to-neighbor relationships that had sustained them for 2 decades. Shimmachi families had always known struggle and sacrifice, so the hardships that came with the Depression were already familiar. Merchants extended credit where they could. Nippon Shoji Kaisha wrote off some of their loans, and neighbors shared what they had with one another. The economy had slowed, but everybody in Shinmachi, the men, women, and children, worked as steadily and skillfully as ever.
Yeah, my father was a carpenter, but he was also the handyman for the Shimmachi, the wooden buildings. As a young man, I went along with my father to the various buildings to replace like a 4x4, 2x4s.
We spent most of our day at the service station restaurant area. And my mom and dad worked the whole time from 8 in the morning, weekdays 8 to 10:30 at night.
My mother was, I hate to say typical, but typical housewife. She had such a big family that she cooked in the morning and cooked at lunch and cooked at dinner. 8 boys and 1 girl.
Peppered among Shimmachi's storefronts were a number of small houses of worship, like Suitengo Shrine, where services were conducted in Minister Jungo Tsutsumi's family home. The Tenrikyo mission of Japan sent Kinzaemon and Kameki Odachi to Hilo to establish their home church in Shimmachi. Their daughters, June and Masako, recall their parents' deep commitment to their daily music and healing ministries.
But our father, I believe, had the responsibility of doing the evangelical work, and so we understand that he traveled by foot, and I don't know what else, but he went somewhere beyond the city limits, and that was his responsibility to establish Tendikyo in the city of Hilo.
As both a minister of the church and woman of the household, Kameki Odachi had many duties.
She's quite busy being a housewife, but she did participate in the services and kept the altar.
She was very quiet as a minister's wife. She was very stoic, but she has this sense of like humanitarianism, you know, and so many of the women parishioners look to her for guidance and direction, and I may not have understood everything, but I could sense that people were drawn to her because of her ability to minister to especially the women that came with their children.
Shimmachi kids led busy lives. Most worked in their parents' businesses before meeting their friends to walk to public school. Education was the most important thing to Shimmachi parents. So after English school, Shimmachi kids went to Japanese school for language and culture classes. After that was any combination of work, play, obligations, and adventures.
We were expected to sit and participate in the service twice a day.
Every church had a julu. Some of them used to have karate, and some would have kendo, but different martial arts. So like when we were 5 years old, we would go to judo. With no question as you had to go.
And when it came to making their own fun, the Shimmachi kids were as inventive as their parents.
We never bought anything. We made everything ourselves. But I think about it now, I wouldn't let my grandchildren play with it.
We used to set little oil cans so that the oopu or the goby fish would swim in at night, and we would, next day all the boys would dive, and we would retrieve those cans with the fish in it. And you know, the Filipino men really love to eat that oopu. So we used to sell the fish to them, and that's where we got our money for candy, shave ice. But our favorite was the dried abalone. That's the one that we always wanted to buy with the money.
There was lots of swimming down gates in the Wailoa River. Several Shimmachi kids became champion swimmers, despite the less than ideal conditions that led them to call it Kukai River.
At that time, there was no sewage system, so everything was going into the river.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where we learned to swim in that river.
Well, yeah.
Shimmachi athletes also competed in football, baseball, tennis, badminton, and sumo, all across what was, at that time, the territory of Hawaii. Although their work schedules were demanding, Shimmachi residents made time to train, compete, cheer, anything they could do to support the home teams. Team spirit, community celebrations, and their dreams for their children strengthened Shimmachi families in good times and bad. Shimmachi's temples, shrines, and churches were the pillars of this support system.
My mother used to go there, and my father. In fact, you know the big urn where you offer the incense? My grandfather brought it back from Japan. To us, all the churches were holy places. it's a safe refuge. We were brought up like that.
As today, every summer, Shimmachi families celebrated the return of their ancestors for Obon. They filled their home shrines with fresh flowers, incense, and food. Buddhist temples held their special Obon services and a Bon dance to entertain and honor those who had passed away.
At that time, we all had to wear only kimono.
Yeah, you had to wear kimono.
You couldn't wear anything else. Really? You had to all wear kimono.
So
my
we
mom
would
have it made.
Made one.
Yeah. And every summer we take that out and
Yeah?
we go to every Bon dance with the same kimono.
Yeah. Ah, dear.
When they had their Bon dance, they'd have all kind of food, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, they must spend a lot of money, though. They had barbecue sticks.
Not anymore, too
nishime.
expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Too expensive.
Shave ice.
Yes.
They'd make musubi.
Bon dances were one of the many ways that people in Shinmachi renewed their strong connections with one another. But for some in Shimmachi, the Japanese culture put them on the margins. Everyday interactions between Shimmachi's Japanese majority and their Chinese, Filipino, Portuguese, and Caucasian neighbors were friendly. Yet intermarriage was uncommon, and interracial families were held at a distance. Joan Goodall's mother was Japanese, and her father, a pharmaceutical distributor, was from England. Her mother moved Joan and her brother Frederick to Shimmachi after the Goodalls divorced in Honolulu.
I grew up half Viet, half Hawaiʻi Japanese. I could feel the difference in the old generation. Could you? Yeah. It was a awkward feeling, and I didn't like it.
And you didn't know why, too?
Well, at those days I didn't know. But as I grew older, I kind of knew. And I kind of understood the language, you know, so I would know what they're talking about.
This graduating class of young American Eagles are now ready to man the fighting ships of the Army and Navy Air Corps.
And as the war in the Pacific drew closer to Hawaii, more and more people in Shinmachi would experience what it meant to be an outsider in an American territory. But for as long as the United States remained at peace, the community of Shimmachi continued to work every day towards a future with abundant opportunities for the generations to come.
Hello, NBC, this is KGU in Honolulu, Hawaii. I am speaking from the roof of the Advertiser Publishing Company building. We have witnessed this morning the distant view, the air bombing of Pearl Harbor by enemy planes, undoubtedly Japanese. One of the bombs dropped within 50 feet of KGU Tower. It is no joke, it is a real war.
These first words describing Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor changed life for everyone in the Hawaiian Islands. Within hours of the United States' formal declaration of war, Hawaii Governor John Poindexter declared martial law, placing Hawaii under military control for nearly 3 years. The Army and Navy seized control of Hilo Bay. Shimmachi's children remember it this way.
During the war, we couldn't go across the street because there's all barbed wires.
All I remember was blackout because we used to live Front Street, yes?
Well, the soldier would knock on the door, and if you got light coming through, got a puka, you gotta go cover it.
Still more difficult to explain the need for these monstrous-looking things.
I was probably in about the 3rd grade when they issued each one of us a gas mask. So we just strung it over our shoulders. When we went to school, carried our book bag plus the case with a gas mask.
Occasionally, soldiers came to school to hold gas mask drills. When the school children received the signal, they were to put their masks on quickly and run into a tent filled with tear gas. The fact that they were loose adult-sized gas masks created a problem.
As soon as we walked in there, we could feel the eyes burning, the neck, the skin burning, so we just walked right out. Everybody came out crying because all the gas masks was too big, too large.
Yes, virtually overnight, the island scene changed. War had come to America's tropical suburb.
The new military order altered the flow of life for everyone in Hawaii, especially those of Japanese ancestry, who came under heightened scrutiny after the Empire of Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. In the propaganda film December the 7th, the voice of reason warns Uncle Sam that the Japanese in Hawaii could not be fully trusted.
Yes, they express their loyalty and no doubt are loyal. They send their children to American public schools where they pledge allegiance to the flag and sing patriotic American songs. But they also send them to their own language schools where they're taught Japanese loyalties, culture, and morals.
I remember we had some Japanese kimono and swords and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think my father first, they burnt it all.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we didn't have anything from Japan that they had.
In 1942, the Hilo Junior Chamber of Commerce petitioned the Hawaii County Board of Supervisors to change the name of Shimmachi to Hanakahi, the Hawaiian word for place of work. The Junior Chamber of Commerce said it was unfitting for any part of Hilo to have a name directly associated with a nation with which we are at war. The consul dismissed the petition, but the controversy reflected the reality that some Hilo people saw Shimmachi as a haven for the enemy, while others were ready to stand up for their neighbors. The Japanese in Hawaii were not subject to the mass removal and incarceration that was carried out in the west coast of the mainland. But the FBI maintained a list of Japanese individuals to be arrested in the event of war that included some in Shimmachi. The arrests were not made for anything that they had done, but for what the U.S. government wanted the public to believe they might do. These arrests were ordered by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Only 6 years had passed since the Japanese community welcomed him to Hilo as the apostle of new democracy. Buddhist and Shinto priests were presented as shadowy figures whose mission in Hawaii was to foster loyalty to Japan.
Shintoism embraces many doctrines. It preaches honor of the ancestors, thereby keeping alive the fires of nationalism and preserving a racial and social bond with the unbroken and divinely descended imperial dynasty.
Across the islands, Japanese schools were shut down and temples and shrines confiscated for military purposes. Because he was a minister, Kinzaemon Odachi was arrested and held at KMC, Kilauea Military Camp outside of Hilo, before being transferred to a Department of Justice internment camp in Lordsburg, New Mexico. This left his wife Kameki with the church and 4 children to care for alone. When asked if she wanted to be reunited with her husband, Kameki, like many wives of the incarcerated, jumped at the chance.
2 very large Caucasian men. I remember looking up at them because they were so tall. And they came to ask my mother, through the interpretation of our eldest sister, because they didn't understand English. But the question was, would you like to be with your husband? Okay. And many of them said, of course, and yes. And that's how it started, that we had to pack our things. And I remember going in a big army truck over Wailoa Bridge and going to the war.
The Army put the Odachis on a ship to San Francisco. June was seasick the entire crossing. It turned out that their mainland destination would not be New Mexico, but a family incarceration camp in Jerome, Arkansas. In addition to raising her children in a strange place amongst people she did not know, Komiki had received word that her husband was gravely ill.
While mother went out to work in the PX, doing KP duty, the older children had to look after the young ones. And we could tell how distraught and how burdened my mother was feeling at that time.
After numerous appeals to the War Relocation Authority, the Odachis received word that they were to be reunited as a family in the same camp. But Reverend Odachi passed away at Lordsburg before the transfer took place. His daughter, Masako, has no anger or bitterness when she talks about the camps, but still feels deeply about the loss of her father.
I was not bitter about what we went through, but I do feel sorry for my mother because her husband, who she dearly loved, was never to come back to us.
Back in Hilo, children had a variety of encounters with the strangers who landed in their city.
Well, we saw a lot of military trucks, military people going up and down Pio Pio Street. And we'd always see them, we always give them the V4 victory sign. Everybody did that when they saw military trucks coming in.
I remember the soldiers coming from the San Beach. Yeah?
Right, I remember that.
They had Spam and Vienna sausage and...
The fondness between the soldiers and the children of Shimmachi was heartfelt, but tinged by the fact that they were children of the so-called enemy race.
Pretty nice to us as kids. They let us roam around the cannons, the machine guns, and so on. But they always told us that if they're having an inspection coming, that we better lose ourselves for the day.
Joan Goodall, whose mother was Japanese and father English, sometimes drew unwanted attention from soldiers who missed their own daughters.
You know why? Because the guys would grab me and they would say, this looks like my child, because half, they're all howlies, That I remember, and I used to be so scared because they would hug,
For many in Shimmachi, the influx of military personnel was also an influx of new customers for their goods and services. The kids even got in on the action.
So I recall this one time when I think it was an ensign or whatever he was in the Navy, said, "I'll give you $5 if you'll go down and get my uniform." So I said, "Sure." So I ran down, got the uniform, and that was the biggest payday for me. It was $5.
The war expanded women's work into areas outside of their homes and businesses. The loss of Buddhist clergy to incarceration and the arrival of soldiers from the mainland placed multiple burdens on Sadako Ohara's mother, Kiyono. Her husband, Reverend Tetsuo Ohara, had been the minister at Hilo Meishoin prior to his death in 1940. When the priests were incarcerated, Mrs. Hara was one of the few people who knew the correct sutras for funeral rites. She went on calls with Mr. Dodo, the funeral director, whenever she was needed. Her spiritual labors sustained the community, but they did not bring a wage to feed her family. For that, Mrs. Hara, like many women in Shimmachi, took in laundry from the military personnel. It was not easy work.
Oh, they were so large. And she would starch and iron, sprinkle.
How did she do it all?
We all used to help.
I guess that's
I used to
it.
put blankets on the bench and iron. Because they're so tall. And we're tiny and trying to iron.
The war brought many hardships, but it also brought new opportunities for Shimmachi to show its inventiveness. When potatoes were rationed, Atebaras invented taro chips. Hilo Macaroni's experiment with a bland German hardtack cracker recipe created Hawaii's beloved saloon pilot cracker. And at Goya Brothers, hungry newcomers were expanding the menu.
People not only came to eat, but a lot of them hung out there and became good friends. And my mom learned a whole lot of dishes and things from them because they came from the mainland. My mom never knew what grilled cheese was all about, what kind of sandwich it was. So she asked that person, please come into the kitchen, show me how to do it. And he became a regular. That's the thing. They personalized their business.
Important and decisive battles. And each time, these men of the 100th Infantry Battalion and the 442nd Combat Team have been right out in front.
As soldiers from the mainland became fixtures in Hilo, second-generation men from Shimmachi and across the Hawaiian Islands joined the armed forces when the Army formed the all-Japanese 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the 442, in early 1943. There were at least 2 soldiers from each block in Shimmachi on the front lines in Europe. Ronald Takahata, who grew up helping his father run quality auto in Shinmachi, was already a translator in the military intelligence service for the duration of the war. Wataru Kohashi left his job at his father's fish cake factory to enlist in the 442nd. Like the thousands of his fellow soldiers of Japanese descent, Kohashi helped to liberate Italy and to rescue the Texas Lost Battalion. He lost many friends, including one who died in his arms. At the end of the war, when martial law was lifted, the beaches were freed of the barbed wire. Most of the soldiers and people in incarceration camps came home, and all of the gas masks were returned to military storage. There was every reason to believe that life in Shimmachi would settle into a steady rhythm of work, prayer, neighborliness, and play. For 8 months, Shimmachi's modest wish was granted.
The Pacific Ocean on the rampage. Swift, towering waves originating in the Aleutian Islands, spreading out for thousands of miles to batter shorelines from Hawaii to South America. One of the worst tidal waves on record takes its toll. Mammoth waves began to break.
My grandfather was living here in Shinmachi. I was probably in the 5th or 6th grade. So in the morning, we usually go to school about 6:45 in the morning. You could hear people screaming and yelling, hey, like tiger wave. We thought it was tiger wave, but they probably were saying like tidal wave. And then they're all standing on the roofs of houses. So we thought, we just yell back, April Fool, April Fool.
It was less than a year after the war ended that a tsunami turned Shimmachi into a swirling chaos of splintered buildings, scattered objects of every kind, broken trees, panicked people, and lifeless bodies. That morning, the ocean receded oddly, and the few who were familiar with tsunamis shouted warnings about the first 2 waves. When the powerful third wave hit Shimmachi, most could only react to survive, if survival was even possible.
During the tidal wave, we were high up, yeah?
Yeah, you guys.
We saw all the 3 waves, you know.
Oh,
coming.
yeah.
We went down on the 3rd wave. But my mother kept telling us, go under the bed, go on top of the bed, go under. We went, I don't know how many times up and down. Up and down. Because she didn't know what to do.
Right, right.
So my uncle had people come and help me, and they tore off the roof to get us out of the house. Then we all got separated from there. Whoever had to go to the hospital or whatever. How did you guys end up?
The thing is, my mother heard the noise, so she opened the door. The water came right in the house, sucked me right out to the front. And then I myself just gave up because the boards were all hitting me and I didn't have anybody by me. So I kind of remember I was receding out. And this man picked me up.
Then I felt that the house was starting to sink. And I said, well, Yoshi, if you're going to stay here, that house is going to cover you with the roof, and that'll be the end of you. So I looked in the back and I saw my brother's surfboard that he built in high school. And when I hopped onto it and the wave started to, or should I say the water, and all that debris seemed to push me towards the sugar mill.
Oh, so you folks were separated already?
Yeah, we were all separated.
And your brother was separated?
My mother was trying to hang on to him.
Oh. Her brother is the one that was lost in the tidal wave?
Mm-hmm. Never found.
The tsunami took the lives of 159 people in the Hawaiian Islands. Over 100 were killed in Hilo alone, 38 from Shimmachi. It was clear right away that the recovery would be long and arduous for the thousands of survivors who lost their homes, businesses, savings, heirlooms, and people they loved dearly. As before, Shimmachi residents worked with what they had in order to rebuild. The Salvation Army helped meet the basic needs of those who had nothing but what they were wearing. The local Boy Scouts had the terrible task of looking for bodies. Mostly, neighbors helped neighbors by taking tsunami refugees into their homes, working together to salvage what could be salvaged and to rebuild as quickly as possible. The Army and Navy were preparing to leave the island in just 5 months, but there were still enough soldiers remaining to lead search and rescue efforts. The Naval Air Station Barracks, located near Hilo's Lyman Airfield, became the new home for hundreds of families who lost everything. The churches provided refuge in the wake of the tsunami, holding the community together as they had since Shimmachi's founding. The 1946 tsunami took everything except the buildings on the corner of Kamehameha Avenue and Bishop Street. These buildings were shielded by the lumber at HPM. Goya Brothers was hit hard, but the family rebuilt and opened May's Fountain in 1946, bringing a spark of life to Shimmachi, serving everything from ham and cheese and root beer floats to Hilo's homemade dish, Loco Moco. A second tsunami in 1960 killed 61 people and destroyed 530 buildings, including the last physical remains of Shimmachi. After losing everything twice in 15 years, many Shimmachi families questioned the wisdom of rebuilding. Others saw new possibilities.
You know, my grandfather, after the 1960 tidal wave, he wanted to call it quits. He really wanted to call it quits. But then my mom said, I'll run the business, you know. And then for a female to be running a fishing tackle business in the 1960s, that was pretty tough. She knew how to fish. She was a good angler also. She proved herself. It wasn't a dress shop. It wasn't a cosmetic store. It wasn't a fabric shop. It was basically a fishing tackle shop then.
Shimmachi was ultimately declared an inundation zone, where rebuilding is prohibited. Displaced residents formed the Shimmachi Club, which hosted an annual reunion to bring all neighbors together and to keep the spirit of mutual support and shared resiliency alive.
See where your brother was buried. And more, you said, was all the people that didn't have any graves.
Right.
They were buried over there.
For Joan Goodall, Shimmachi remains a vast terrain of unanswered questions, especially about her lost brother, Frederick.
Because I saw the mounds.
And somebody told you that was the area.
Yeah. This was for the tidal wave victims. Because they couldn't find the owners. You know, and my brother was 7, I think, at that time. So my mother even came out of the hospital because she had gashes on her head and she was bound up. So she told the hospital she got to go out, go look for my brother.
At that time, they never found him then, yeah?
No, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
At least when it's in the area.
Yeah.
Somewhere in this area, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, he gonna be happy.
The tsunamis did not take all of Shimmachi. At Hilo Daijingu, a singular female koma inu, a lion-dog statue, sits next to the empty base of her mate, which was swept away in the wave. Traces of Shimmachi still appear in the S. Tokunaga store's annual Ulua Challenge, on the grocery store's shelves, in the temple sanctuaries, and especially in the stories of those who remember this place before the tsunami. Over many decades, the mutual support that the Shimmachi Association brought into being in 1913 remains alive in the Japanese business community.
You know, we can get more done together than we can do fighting each other. So we work together as a group to better the business, you know, better the industry, but that still exists today.
There is not that class structure that you have in a lot of communities. You know, people here just, and I think because we all know where our roots are.
Yeah.
And we all came from the same place. Some of us were a little luckier than others. And that's why that feeling of the kumiai is very strong in Hawaii, because you're responsible for your community.
My father passed away, so they made a section for us to stay.
Shimmachi families still carry forward their ancestors' traditions from the past and their dreams for the future.
The old days, I guess the parents always wanted to make their children better than who they were.
That's right. We told the parents, if you send us to college, we're not going to come back and do hard labor.
The sugar industry brought Japanese laborers to Hawaii. The sugar company set the rules that the Shimmachi Association had to work by. Using the skills and values they brought from plantation life and Japanese culture, the people of Shimmachi created their own fertile ground of opportunity and stability. In 2016, the sugar industry made its final exit from Hawaii. The descendants of the Hilo Shimmachi Association are still here, and they continue on.